to have you with us either live or watching our recording. I'll go ahead and get my PowerPoint loaded up and ready to go, and we'll introduce ourselves and we will get going. Okay, here we go. Oops. All right. So I'll introduce myself here. I'm Emily Shrider. I'm an intern here at the Carruth Center. I'm joined by my co-presenter, Emily Melhorn, who is also an intern at the Carruth Center. And we're excited to be meeting with you today to talk about self-care and to talk with you a little bit more about stuff that we're passionate about, and yeah, to talk with you a little bit more about how you can be caring for yourselves as graduate students. We know it's there's many demands on your time and on your energy, and want to make sure that we're encouraging you all to care for yourselves in the best ways that you can. We'll go ahead and get started. So let's talk a little bit about what self-care is anyway. So maybe, right, we've heard a lot of times that self-care is maybe used as a buzzword. It's talked about as this thing that we should make sure that we're doing. We should make sure that we're prioritizing and taking time for self-care. But oftentimes I think it's not super well defined for us anyway. We don't necessarily all have the same definition that we think of when we think about self-care. And so for some of us, maybe thinking about self-care gives us a pretty strong negative reaction. Maybe thinking about self-care and something that we just think about, oh, I don't have any time or energy or money to do that, to take care of myself. Some of us maybe have strong associations with self-care in a positive way, that we think really highly of being able to take care of ourselves. And that's something that we find really positive and helpful. So wherever it is that you're coming from, I just want you to be aware of whatever sort of response that you're having to this term self-care. Just be aware of that as we move forward into our presentation today. And I want to make sure that we define self-care in a way that allows us all to sort of have a similar understanding of where it is that we're coming from and what it is that we're going to be talking about today. So what is self-care, right? So self-care is anything that we do in order to manage our stress, to meet our needs, and to be the best people that we can be. So that's pretty broad. There's lots of different things that we do to take care of ourselves every single day, maybe things that we don't even realize or think about as self-care. Oftentimes when I talk about self-care with folks, some people may have a reaction of, "Ooh, I don't do anything to take care of myself. I don't do any self-care." And the reality is that's not true. If you made it here today, if you made it through this far in the semester, if you've made it through this far in graduate school, you've done something to take care of yourself. You've done something to manage your stress, to meet your needs, and to try to be the best person that you can be. The question is what you do for self-care working? Is it helping you in the long run? Again, we practice self-care, we take care of ourselves, we've made it this far. And so we're doing something right in order to take care of ourselves. But again, the question being, are there things that maybe I want to do differently or do more intentionally to be more mindful of how I can really be proactive in caring for myself? I like this picture up here on the right, and it says you can't pour from an empty cup, so take care of yourself first. The reality is, again, there's lots of demands on our time and energy that we pour ourselves into our work, to our research, to our academics, and to our personal lives. There's lots of things that demand a lot of our time and energy. And when we're not pouring into ourselves, when we're not taking care of ourselves, we can't pour our energy into the things that we do every day if we're not filled up ourselves. So it's really important that we've got to be able to recharge our batteries so that we can keep going and keep pursuing the things that we're passionate about, the work that we need to be doing. Let's talk about some self-care myths. So again, remember, I talked a little bit about, again, some of these maybe negative reactions to thinking about self-care. So when I talk about self-care, there's some things that self-care isn't. So I'll start you there first. So self-care isn't selfish. Some of us may have a reaction to not wanting to take care of ourselves if we really feel like, ooh, this is this is selfish. I shouldn't be spending time and energy and money on myself when there are other things in my life that are more deserving of that time and energy and attention. But again, the reality is we've got to be able to take care of ourselves so that we have the energy to keep going and keep pouring into other areas in our lives. It's not selfish to be able to prioritize meeting our own needs so that we can keep going, so that we can do those things that we really care about. Self-care isn't wasting time and money and resources. I really could get on my soapbox a little bit and talk about, some of the myths we hear about self-care, or this idea that we just have to be really extravagant or wasteful with our precious time, with our limited money and resources. And I really want to focus on self-care as being those things that we can do every day that don't cost us a lot, physically, mentally, emotionally, etc. Um, Self-care also isn't avoiding problems. So sometimes, maybe there's a misconception about self-care as in, well, if I take care of myself, if I, maybe sit down and watch TV, that I'm ignoring or avoiding bigger problems. And that's simply not true. Again, sometimes we've got to be able to take care of our various different needs in order to be able to then choose later on how we want to tackle problems. It's not inherently avoiding those things. It's taking care of ourselves so that we can deal with these problems later on. Self-care isn't always fun. It's not always the activities that we really enjoy doing. So sometimes the most self-caring thing that we can do for ourselves is confronting that thing we've been avoiding, or doing the hard stuff so that we can relax later. It might be, prioritizing how we spend our time and doing things that aren't fun, if it means taking care of ourselves in the long run. So for example, like going to the dentist, that's a thing that we do to take care of ourselves. And that's most people would say that that's not very fun. But it's something that we do. It doesn't have to be enjoyable, but it's something that we do to look out for ourselves in the long run. And again, self-care doesn't have to be extravagant. Again, self-care isn't always bubble baths and spa days. It's not always taking vacations and taking time off, checking out of our lives, because that's not the reality for most folks. We just can't, take a break from our lives and do something really extravagant. So I, again, want to be thinking about self-care being those things that we can choose to do every day, that help us to be a little bit more proactive in how we want to respond to the stressors in our lives. Self-care is essential. So this means that, again, we've got to make sure that we're giving enough time and energy to taking care of ourselves, and giving self-care as much as of a priority as we do the other things in our lives. It's, again, critical. I've said this before, I'll say it again. We've got to take care of ourselves so that we can keep going and keep doing the things that we need to do. Self-care means looking out for ourselves both in the present and in the future. So looking out for, what do I need right now, as well as what do I need in the long term, in the future? How can I take care of myself and meet my needs now, as well as look out for my future self? Self-care is going to be unique to each one of us. So each person is going to have unique needs, unique interests, unique stressors and demands on their time and energy. And so what we choose to do for self-care is going to be unique and tailored to each one of us. There's no one size fits all prescription for self-care, but it's really going to be tailored to what it is that you find most able to meet your needs. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in our presentation, about how you can be intentional about choosing self-care activities that meet your needs. And like I said before, self-care is the small daily choices in addition to the big activities. So again, oftentimes we think of self-care as being things like exercise or getting enough sleep or spending time with friends. And those are all really important things. And we want to make sure that we're allowing time in our schedules as much as we can to do some of those big things. But as well, we want to make sure that we're also thinking about the small things. So things like making sure that you've had enough water to drink, eating snacks when you're hungry, noticing how you are physically responding to feelings of hunger and thirst. Those small little things that we can do every day that don't necessarily require hours of our time, those are important as well.
So Emily just went over what self-care is and why it's important. And before we get into what kinds of activities to engage in for self-care, it's important and critical to know how to check in with ourselves, to know what activities to choose, or what self-care to engage in. So there's a couple ways we can check in with ourselves. We can check in with ourselves emotionally. We can check into our cognitions and our thoughts, and we can check into our body. How are we physically feeling? So on this slide specifically, how are we feeling? So that's one way we can check in. And then based on how we're feeling, maybe pick some self-care activities and some self-care to engage in that meet and help with that emotion piece there. So maybe you're feeling really stressed. Maybe you're feeling lonely. You're missing people. On the slide here, isolated. Maybe you're feeling angry. Tune into what you're feeling, and that will help you pick what self-care to engage in. So maybe even practicing that right here in this moment. How are you feeling as you sit in this presentation today, the Monday after Easter? What are you feeling in this moment? And sometimes we don't do that, right? We go about our day. We're not really checking in with how we're feeling. We're just going and going on autopilot. So just practicing that right now in this moment. How are you feeling? Maybe you're feeling bored. Maybe you're feeling excited, engaged. And let that be like a practice to some of this. On the next slide, this is a slide depicting what I mentioned earlier about checking in with what we're thinking. What are our cognitions saying? Are our minds really in the future? What's going to happen next? Are we fearful about the unexpected? What's my exam grade going to be? Maybe you're thinking about the past. Oh my gosh, I got that B, that C. What's going to happen in the rest of this course for me? Maybe you're missing people here too. Maybe you're worried about this imposter syndrome that we see come up for graduate students and students all across the board. But for graduate students like this, am I as good as my peers? Am I able to do this? Am I going to be able to do this career I set out to do? So tuning into those cognitions can be helpful because that can also inform us what the best self-care activity to engage in is. And then also we can tune into how we're feeling physically. Our minds and our bodies are so interconnected. So our bodies can tell us a lot actually about how we're feeling and thinking, and vice versa. So how we're feeling and thinking, we can often see that reflected in our bodies as well. So we're going to do an activity together as practice to tune into our bodies, because this is one maybe that I think people don't often think of. We think of like, what are we thinking? How are we feeling? But maybe not tuning into our bodies as much. And so we're going to practice a way to check in with our bodies together. It's only going to take about 6 minutes. And it's an activity called progressive muscle relaxation. And so it's an activity that's going to progressively, so from toes to the top of your head, progressively tense and relax your muscles. And so the hope is at the end of this activity, you might notice where you were holding tension that you weren't aware of. And then you'll be actively relaxing those muscles. And this is something you can engage in while you're sitting in class, right before bed, really anytime at all. So Emily's going to start that video for us. And if you feel comfortable, I suggest closing your eyes while you go through this activity. I think it's going to ask you to really get into a comfortable position wherever you're sitting. And we're going to engage in this together.
Progressive muscle relaxation is an exercise that reduces stress and anxiety in your body by having you slowly tense and then relax each muscle. This exercise can provide an immediate feeling of relaxation, but it's best to practice frequently. With experience, you will become more aware of when you are experiencing tension, and you will have the skills to help you relax. During this exercise, each muscle should be tense, but not to the point of strain. If you have any injuries or pain, you can skip the affected area. Pay special attention to the feeling of releasing tension in each muscle and the resulting feeling of relaxation. Let's begin. Sit back or lie down in a comfortable position. Shut your eyes if you're comfortable doing so. Begin by taking a deep breath and noticing the feeling of air filling your lungs. Hold your breath for a few seconds. Release the breath slowly and let the tension leave your body. Take in another deep breath and hold it. Again, slowly release the air. Even slower now, take another breath. Fill your lungs and hold the air. Slowly release the breath and imagine the feeling of tension leaving your body. Continue breathing slowly throughout this exercise. Try to focus on the feeling of air filling and leaving your lungs. It will be normal for your mind to wander. When it does, do your best to bring it back to the moment. Now, move your attention to your feet. Begin to tense your feet by curling your toes in the arch of your foot. Hold on to the tension and notice what it feels like. Release the tension in your foot. Notice the new feeling of relaxation. Next, begin to focus on your lower leg. Tense the muscles in your calves. Hold them tightly and pay attention to the feeling of tension. Release the tension from your lower legs. Again, notice the feeling of relaxation. Remember to continue taking deep breaths. Next, tense the muscles of your upper leg and pelvis. You can do this by tightly squeezing your thighs together. Make sure you feel tenseness without going to the point of strain. And release. Feel the tension leave your muscles. Begin to tense your stomach and chest. You can do this by sucking your stomach in. Squeeze harder and hold the tension. Release the tension. Allow your body to go limp. Let yourself notice the feeling of relaxation. Continue taking deep breaths. Breathe in slowly, noticing the air fill your lungs, and hold it. Release the air slowly. Feel it leaving your lungs. Next, tense the muscles in your back by bringing your shoulders together behind you. Hold them tightly. Tense them as hard as you can without straining, and keep holding. Release the tension from your back. Feel the tension slowly leaving your body, and the new feeling of relaxation taking its place. Notice how different your body feels when you allow it to relax. Tense your arms all the way from your hands to your shoulders. Make a fist and squeeze all the way up your arm. Hold it. Release the tension from your arms and shoulders. Notice the feeling of relaxation in your fingers, hands, arms, and shoulders. Notice how your arms feel limp and at ease. Move up to your neck and your head. Tense your face and your neck by distorting the muscles around your eyes and mouth. Release the tension. Again, notice the new feeling of relaxation. Finally, tense your entire body. Your feet, legs, stomach, chest, arms, head, and neck. Tense harder without straining. Hold on to the tension. Now release. Allow your whole body to go limp. Pay attention to the feeling of relaxation and how different it is from the feeling of tension. Continue taking deep breaths. Begin to wake your body up by slowly moving your muscles. Adjust your arms and legs. Stretch your muscles and open your eyes when you're ready. You've completed the progressive muscle relaxation exercise. Repeat this exercise daily to experience the ongoing benefits of relaxation.
Okay, thanks for engaging in that with us, you all. Hope you noticed something about how your body is feeling in this moment. Notice any tension and maybe feeling a little bit more relaxed after we've practiced releasing some of the tension. Go ahead and share the PowerPoint again. Okay, so next we're gonna talk about some of the things that we can do to take care of ourselves. So after we've checked in with ourselves with what we're feeling physically, what we're feeling emotionally, what we find ourselves often thinking about, we'll turn our attention and our focus now to what we can do in order to respond to some of those needs and those sensations. So the things that we can do practically to take care of ourselves. So this next part of our presentation, we're going to talk about making a self-care plan. Again, that plan is going to be unique to you to figure out what are the things that you can choose to do when you're feeling really anxious, when you're feeling physically tense, when you're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, when you feel really busy and you don't have much time. What are those things that you can pick and choose to do in response to those needs? So at this time, we'll invite you to either physically get out a piece of paper and a pen to take some notes on, to make your plan, put it in paper, or if you don't have paper around, to type somewhere, to keep it on your phone, on your computer, so that you have your self-care plan to reference that you can look back at. Emily and I will talk about some ideas for things we can do and create and put in our self-care plan. And we're sure you also have ideas of things that you're already doing or things that you maybe would like to try and adding into your self-care plan. So feel free to take some notes and jot this down so you have your plan to take with you after our presentation is done today. So again, we're going to be talking about our self-care plan, and we're going to be looking at all of these different domains and how we can take care of ourselves. So physical things, social, mental, emotional, and spiritual things, all of these things that we can add into our self-care plan. So let's talk first of all about how to use our self-care plan. So our self-care plan can be a toolbox. So like I shared before, when we notice that we're feeling such and such way, we're feeling sad, we're feeling angry, anxious, when we're feeling tense, sore, tired, um, this can be a toolbox of things that we can choose to do when we notice that we're feeling this way. And so our self-care plan is a toolbox, so we recognize that not every tool works in every situation. So for example, if you have a flat tire, you don't want to fix that with a hammer. So we want to have lots of different tools at our disposal so we can pick and choose what we want and need to do depending on various needs and various situations. A self-care plan can be an invitation to add in various activities to your schedule. So if you find yourself needing to prioritize certain activities, recognizing, I don't do as much of this thing as I wish I would, our self-care plan can be an invitation to, again, add those things to our schedule. So allotting, even if it's 10, 15, 20 minutes, putting that into our schedule for the day to make sure that we prioritize those activities and do those things that we know make us feel better. So again, literally adding it to our calendars or making sure that we add those things to our to-do list, those things that make us feel better. Our self-care plan can also be an invitation to say no to things and to set some boundaries. So a lot of the activities we'll be talking about might be things we want to do more of, but a self-care plan can also be an opportunity to figure out what we want to do less of and to say no to some of those things, to set boundaries for ourselves and to choose not to do things that we know don't make us feel very good, or to limit those things as much as possible. And then finally, our self-care plan is a really good reminder to add in rest, fun, and self-kindness into our lives. think all of these things are things that can really easily be tossed to the wayside as students when we feel so preoccupied and overwhelmed with what we have to do academically. We can forget those things that make us human, that resting, that taking that time to recharge, having fun, doing activities that we like, and then remembering to treat ourselves kindly. Again, just a reminder here that self-care isn't selfish, and we want to make sure that we're um, again, pouring into our own cups and reminding ourselves that we're humans first and grad students second.
So one of the components you can tune into when creating your self-care plan, we're going to go over several. So I think 5 or 6, and one of them being the physical component. So might seem kind of straightforward, right? Tuning into, are we eating? Are we sleeping? Are we moving our bodies? But knowing, as being a fellow graduate student for a few years, sometimes these are the things that slip, like drinking enough water. I think Emily mentioned this before. Like, this could be something small. If you're realizing like, wow, I'm only drinking maybe a glass of water a day and the rest is coffee or energy drinks, this could maybe be something to include on your self-care plan. Setting up a regular routine for sleep, making sure you're getting at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep each night, perhaps. Even just things like deep breathing. So that exercise we did together, the progressive muscle relaxation, had you practicing some of that? Really deep breathing in fully and holding that breath and releasing that breath. Just taking maybe a couple of minutes to do that in between classes or at the end of your day or at the beginning of your day can really have a positive impact. And then eating healthy foods, intuitively eating when we're hungry, not waiting until 6 when we're all burnt out to then realize, we hadn't eaten all day. These could be things to add to that portion of the list or plan. Another component would be social. So are we engaging with our social support network? Are we reaching out to our friends, our family, our support system? Do we need more of that? Connecting with people has a positive impact on us. And I think that can vary person to person, where we talked about these plans being unique, right? Some of us are more introverted, some of us are more extroverted. Sorry. Emily and I are both working from home today, so the joy of having pets. Yeah, so I guess social support is helpful, and we can include that in our self-care plan. And then I think there on at the bottom there, time alone. Sometimes we just need time to not be interacting with other people. Maybe you realize after going through 3 courses, you kind of need some time for yourself on a Wednesday after 3 courses, and maybe engaging socially would be too much, that you need some time alone to recharge and recharge and get regrounded for the evening. So these are social aspects, could be things you could include on your self-care plan as well. And mental. So this component could be engaging things that activities that engage our minds. So I like to do puzzles. And I recently was chatting with a student who wants to pursue doing an all-white puzzle. I'm like, you go, girl, but I don't know if I could do that. But that could be an example, like something you put on your plan, something that gets your mind engaged, something that you look forward to, even just simply watching TV or Netflix, your favorite TV show. You watch an episode a day or a couple episodes a week. Something that revitalizes you, keeps you engaged, is maybe fun. Some video games are even both social and mental, fit into both the social and mental components, right? You can connect with other people through video games. So you might hit two birds, one stone kind of thing with this category, but you can be creative with this. But I guess just throwing out too that as we go through these components, I would suggest maybe not getting caught up in so much of like which component is it going into, but does it fit some of them or at least one of them, and does it bring you fulfillment? Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So I'll talk next about some of the things that we can do to take care of our emotional well-being. And when I think about emotional, and a little bit with mental as well, sometimes these are things that like we want to make sure that we engage with those needs. And then other times are things that we maybe need less of. So like if we need distractions. So like knowing if we've had a really hard emotional day, knowing that sometimes we need to not avoid the emotions and to feel the things that we're feeling and to really take care of ourselves and tending to those emotions, to those hurts. But other times we want to make sure that we find things that help us to get out of the stuck feeling maybe for a little bit, even if it's just temporary. But finding reliefs from some of those negative emotions. We neither want to ignore them or dwell on them. So just finding a good balance between, again, how we can sort of indulge these needs as well as, do things that make us feel a little bit lighter and a little bit happier. So again, feeling those emotions, not ignoring them. Journaling can be a really great way to process some of the things that we're feeling, to work things out. No wrong way to journal, but writing things out can be really helpful. Finding something funny to laugh at, again, finding a little humor, a little levity when we're having really rough days. As you can probably tell, I'm a dog person, so my one of my favorite funny things to laugh at is finding dog videos. There's plenty of those online, but finding something funny to laugh at, or even snuggling my own dog and playing with her makes me feel a little bit lighter. Things like asking for help, again, this dips into some of that social piece that Emily was talking about, but asking for help, getting support from other people. And then also really important to note is taking breaks and unplugging from social media or even the news, things that may be really emotionally heavy for us, taking breaks from those things. Again, we want to make sure that we're doing those things that both tend to those emotions as well as treat some of those negative emotions. Okay. Here we go. So next we'll talk about spiritual self-care. And you don't necessarily have to be religious to practice spiritual self-care. You don't have to identify with a particular religious tradition or religious belief. But spiritual self-care is simply how we find meaning and connection with the universe around us, how we make sense of what goes on. Maybe it's connecting to a higher power, maybe it's connecting with nature. But whatever it is that we feel connects us to a greater sense of purpose. So for some folks, again, this may be religious practices, things like attending religious services, praying, connecting with a body of believers for whatever faith it is that you practice. So some of those more traditional practices, if that feels really meaningful and important to you, do those things. Other folks might find meaning in connecting with nature or even connecting with other people, that feels really meaningful and important to them. Things like meditation and mindfulness that allow us to slow down and to meditate on the world around us, about the things happening in our lives, to practice some stillness and self-reflection. Gratitude is a huge benefit. It's been proven to make us feel happier and to produce more positive emotions when we take inventory of the things in our lives that we're grateful for. So spending time and reflecting on again on things beyond our day-to-day lives, and then getting inspired. So maybe this is connecting with poetry, with music, with art, something that feels really inspirational for you. Can be another way to tend to that spiritual need. Next, I want to talk a little bit about our physical space. And this is the last sort of self-care domain I'll talk a little bit about. And so, especially knowing that in the pandemic, maybe our physical space has become a little bit more limited. It's not as easy to go out and about and to change our scenery. And we spend a lot more time in our homes. At least I have it, own that for myself. So being mindful of how we can set up our physical space to most benefit us. So setting physical boundaries. So looking at where are you doing your schoolwork so you won't be distracted. So finding a place that you know is free from distractions as much as possible. So avoiding working in bed or on couches, places that are a little bit more comfy that maybe we're more prone to be distracted or we feel more relaxed. And so working at a table or at a desk can help set different boundaries so that we can relax on our beds and on our couches, and we can make sure that we're doing our work at tables and desks to sort of differentiate the different functions and different purposes of the two. So setting ourselves up to work in a place where will be most productive, most engaged. Also looking at having a private space for you to be alone. So when you need to be by yourself, you live with roommates, with partners, with family, having a space where you can be by yourself can be really important. Um, just to take care of your own needs where you know you won't be interrupted by others. So eliminating distractions again, talked a little bit before about things like the news or social media can be really distracting and can cause us to have pretty strong emotional reactions sometimes. So even like putting our phones in different rooms can be really helpful, like taking a break from them, um, or from technology when we can, eliminating distractions and like physically removing them and putting them in a different space, so that you feel like you can do your best work. And then getting a change of scenery. So nobody works works their best when they're in the same environment all the time. So getting up to stretch our legs and to move our bodies can be a helpful time and place to, even if it's just briefly to get a change of scenery. Weather's nicer, so it's much easier to get a few minutes outside, whether it's taking a quick lap around the block, just getting out to stretch our legs and get a breath of fresh air, can be really helpful in helping to us to um, sort of shift our mindsets. Okay.
So there was a slide earlier that Emily had up on the screen about what our self-care plans are, and why they're important and why self-care is important. At the very bottom, it said that self-care isn't selfish, right? And we are humans. We need to remind ourselves of that and to be kind to ourselves. So I guess backing up a minute, like think about maybe what you've written down for your self-care plan as we went through those components, or things that you are looking forward to maybe practicing. Maybe you've jotted them down in your notes in your phone, or written them down, or just thought about it. And think about too, like how you're tuning in to being kind to yourself. We work hard as graduate students, as students in general, and self-care isn't selfish, and it's important to care and be kind to ourselves and others, especially just during the current social climate and during a pandemic, right? So we wanted to now kind of transition into some discussion about self-compassion and being kind to ourselves, and that being a piece of self-care. So self-compassion itself is defined as treating yourself as you treat a friend, right? So a lot of times we were talking about tuning into our cognitions. Oftentimes our cognitions are self-critical, right? Oh, I wish I would have done this better, or I should have done this, I should have done that. We tend to lean into this negativity bias. We kind of lean into that, the negative kind of cognitions, I think naturally. And yet, if you think about how you would approach a friend who's going through a problem and they come to you for support, probably wouldn't talk to them like, oh, how dare you? You shouldn't have done that. You messed up. You're a failure. You're not going to come back from this. We wouldn't talk to our friends like that, right? And so, how come we talk to ourselves like that? And so self-compassion is really this practice of treating ourselves like we would treat others, like we would treat a friend. The practice in which we learn to be a good friend to ourselves when we need it. we can rely on others for support. And I think supporting ourselves is important as well. So it's really being an ally to ourselves rather than being an inner enemy, which is where those self-critical thoughts come from. And our mind can fight back at us on that. And so self-compassion is then broken down into 3 core components. One being that self-kindness, being a good friend to ourselves. One being common humanity, right? That if we look across experiences, lived experiences as humans, a lot of us experience similar kinds of things and similar hardships. And if we look at a group, as graduate students, we might run into similar common experiences as graduate students. And the idea here is to maybe take some comfort in that common experience, that you're not alone, that this is part of that human experience, that we can come together and then embrace that self-compassion, that self-kindness, that I'm not in this alone. This isn't, all my doing, that this is happening to me. I'm not alone. And then mindfulness. So earlier I said sometimes our cognitions, or a lot of times our cognitions live in the future and in the past. Mindfulness is bringing our attention to the present. And we actually did that in that progressive muscle relaxation exercise too. We tuned into our physical bodies here and now. And I asked you to also tune into how are you feeling in this presentation here today on Monday, right? And so that's bringing ourselves here and now and not in the past and future where those maybe more negative thoughts lie or ruminating thoughts lie. So those are the 3 core components of self-compassion.
Okay, here they are again, arranged in a graphic form. So again, like Emily talked about, these are the 3 components of self-compassion. And maybe for some of us, one of these 3 maybe sticks out as being a little bit more challenging than another. So take a minute just to notice if there are different parts or pieces that feel really difficult. Maybe it's really hard to stay present and to notice the thoughts and the feelings that you're experiencing. Maybe it feels really hard to treat yourself kindly, like Emily shared, like treating ourselves like we would treat a friend, or being that ally to ourselves. Maybe it's hard to touch base with the common humanity component, remembering that everyone makes mistakes and you're not alone in your struggle. You're not the only one who struggles with those experiences. Maybe it feels that way. So take note of which of these 3 maybe feels the most challenging for you. And while you're doing that, I also want to invite you to write yourself a message, a message for your future self. And again, if you're taking notes on paper or electronically, you can make note of that and write those things down to take with you. But what is a message that you would want to take with you to remind yourself the next time you really feel like you're really struggling? And maybe this is an idea of something that you would say to a friend who is struggling. Okay, so I know it's really easy for me to encourage my friend, but it's really hard to encourage myself. So what is something I would say to a friend? I'm going to write that down and keep it for myself, that message to my future self. Or maybe it's something that some message of support, of encouragement, of hope that someone else has given to you that you want to make sure that you take with you. And so we'll give you a moment or 2 to just think about what is that message that you want to take with you, that short little snippet of something that you want to take with you to remind yourself of when things get really difficult and really challenging. Okay, if you still need maybe a little more inspiration, I'll share with you um, my message of hope that I bring to myself. And um, this is something that a friend has shared with me when I've really struggled. And she shared with me the message that now is not forever. And it really touches into that sort of mindfulness piece of reminding myself that even though I'm really struggling right now, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling insecure, whatever it is that I'm feeling and really struggling with, that it doesn't last forever. That yes, it's acknowledging that I'm struggling in the present moment, but recognizing that that is what's happening right now, and it's not a forecast or prediction for the future. And I really enjoy being able to take that with me, um, and being able to hold on to that message, and so I can provide it to myself and also hear her voice in my mind saying, "Now is not forever. Now is not forever." So reminding me again to stay present with the emotions and the things that I'm experiencing without dwelling on them and assuming that the future will be really bleak as well. Emily, is there a message that you have for yourself that you would like to share?
Sounds kind of maybe a little corny, but um, growing up, my parents always reminded me that I can only do my best. And they'd be like, "Are you doing your best?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." And this would be, in a moment where I really felt like I was struggling, or maybe I was behind in school, or was comparing myself to my classmates and where they were and what they were succeeding in, and not feeling like I was there. Maybe that insecurity that Emily mentioned too. And they said, "Are you doing your best?" And best is relative. That can change, right? But I put in my effort, and I'd say, "Yes, I am," and be like, "That's all you can do." And I felt, that reminded me of being comfortable and confident in my ability, um, and to reassure myself that I can only do that in the present. So that's one thing that's like my mantra that I keep with me.
Yeah, touches base on that self-kindness piece. I love it. Okay. Well, hopefully you have something a message again that you want to take with you and keep in your pocket. Um, yeah, just centering and focusing on self-compassion is so critical and so important. And oftentimes I think we can feel overwhelmed by there's not enough hours in the day, there's not enough time. How do I take care of myself? And this is a really practical way to tend to maybe it's some of the more mental pieces when we're feeling really critical and hard on ourselves, to tend to the emotional pieces when we're really struggling and suffering. This is a really easy way, these messages of hope, of encouragement, of community and connection that we can provide ourselves to tend to some of those needs. They can be really powerful ways to tend to our needs and to recognize, um, yeah, that we're worth caring for, we're worth being compassionate towards.
Emily and I wanted to make sure we included some information about Carruth. So the Carruth Center is the counseling center here on campus, and so that is accessible for all students, and it's free of charge. Most of our services are free of charge, and insurance is not involved. Diagnoses and things wouldn't be included on student records. So just throwing those tidbits out there. Some of the services we provide would be short-term individual therapy. That is free of charge. We have consultation appointments, which is maybe, a student just needs some guidance, even more short-term than short-term individual therapy, just for like 1 or 2 sessions, need some help problem solving through something. We offer group therapy. We actually have a graduate student group that runs every semester, I believe, and gets a good turnout every semester. And Emily and I are running it this spring, and it's likely to run this summer and then the fall. So that is a great space for graduate students to come together and support one another and receive support as well. Our student assistance program is for students looking for aid with alcohol and substance use. We do outreaches like what we're doing today. We have ADHD and learning disorder evaluations, which is that testing there on the screen that's referring to. And we have psychiatry, in-house psychiatry available for students. And just to mention about our crisis intervention work that we have. So our phone number is always active. And so anytime, even at 3 a.m. on the weekends, after hours, that phone number is active. Someone will always pick up that phone. So if you're ever in a crisis, don't hesitate to reach out. We also have a crisis text line if that feels more comfortable for students. The information's right there in the red box as well. So you can text WVU to 741-741. And if it's an immediate emergency, we do suggest calling 911 or campus police. Yeah, so those are our services, and we wanted to make sure that we just gave a little bit of information about that here today.
Yeah, if you're noticing some of the self-care, self-compassion stuff seems to be really difficult for you, we're here to help. So whatever it is that you need, will help you figure out what might be the best course of action for you. Okay, this time we'll sort of close out the PowerPoint in just a moment here, and ask if folks have any questions or comments today. But before we do that, we want to make sure that give time and space for the evaluation. And I believe that link will also be in the chat, but here's a QR code for link for the evaluation. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. Hopefully folks have got that. Thanks for filling out that eval. If there's any questions or comments, folks have things that they want to follow up on, please feel free to either drop those in the chat or contact Emily and I. Emily, you and I can link maybe the link to the video if folks want to save that, as well as the link to the Carruth Center for folks. Go ahead and do that so you all can save those links if that's helpful. Well, if there's no questions, thanks everyone for coming and for for participating. Hopefully you had some takeaways for self-care. I see Daniel's question. Therapy sessions mostly are virtual. We're slowly starting to do more in-person opportunities. A lot of those are outdoors. So we have options to do walk-in talks with clinicians, to walk around the track outside of our office, which is at HEB, the Health Education Building. Some clinicians are also doing some in-person visits in socially distant rooms, but there are some options for, we're slowly starting to do more in-person work. Good question. So welcome.
Okay, if there are no further questions, that will end our workshop. And students, thank you so much for taking time to be with us this afternoon. I hope you've learned some self-care skills, relaxation skills. And thank you, both Emilys from the Carruth Center. All right, everybody have a good week. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Thank
all.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, Emily.
Sure. Thanks so much for having us.